Silicon Valley's elite saw Jamie Jenkins as nothing more than a ghost in a polyester uniform. For 3 years, she cleared coffee cups while the smartest men on Earth built the future right in front of her. But on a rainy Tuesday, 50 PhDs inside the Fairmont Hotel hit a dead end that threatened to bankrupt a billion-dollar aerospace company. They desperately needed a miracle to save them. What they got was the shy waitress. Jamie didn't just translate their impossible document. She dismantled their entire reality. When the experts failed, the invisible girl solved everything. This is her story. October 14th, 2023. The Fairmont Hotel, San Francisco. 10:15 p.m. The air in the gold ballroom didn't smell like luxury anymore. It smelled of stale espresso, overheating laptops, and the distinct, acrid scent of male panic. Jamie Jenkins adjusted her apron, wincing slightly as the knot dug into her lower back. It was her second double shift in 3 days. Her feet, encased in sensible, ugly black non-slip shoes, throbbed with a rhythm that matched the rain, hammering against the hotel's panoramic windows. Table 4 needs clearing. Jamie. Stop daydreaming. The floor manager, a man named Rick who wore too much cologne, snapped as he breezed past. On it, Rick, she whispered, keeping her head down. That was the rule. Head down. Eyes on the tray. Be invisible. Jamie was 26, but with her hair pulled back in a severe, fraying bun and her posture slumped in perpetual apology, she looked older, tired. She moved toward table 4, a sprawling mahogany beast in the center of the room that was currently occupied by the upper echelon of Aerodyne Global. She knew who they were not because she cared about aerospace engineering, but because they had been renting this ballroom for a week, racking up a tab that could pay her rent for a decade. At the head of the table sat Arthur Sterling, the CEO. He was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite and dressed by Italian tailors. Right now, however, the granite was cracking. He was rubbing his temples so hard his knuckles were white. We have 48 hours, people. Sterling's voice was a low growl that silenced the clatter of china in the room. The Department of Defense isn't going to wait. The prototype engine is sitting in the Nevada desert waiting for the ignition sequence, and we can't even read the manual to turn the damn thing on. To Jamie's left, a man with a ponytail and a t-shirt that said NASA is for quitters slammed his fist on the table. This was Grant Harrison, the lead cryptographer. It's not a manual, Arthur. It's gibberish. We've run it through DeepMind. We've run it through the NSA's scrapers. It's a dead language mixed with noise. Dr. Volkov took this secret to the grave. Jamie froze. Her hand hovered over a half-eaten plate of cold salmon. Volkov. The name sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She gripped the plate, her knuckles turning pale. She forced herself to breathe. Just clear the table, Jamie. You need this tip. You have to pay for your mom's medication on Friday. She reached for a coffee cup, but her hand shook. The cup rattled against the saucer. Hey! Watch it, Grant Harrison snapped, not even looking at her. He swept his arm out, gesturing at the massive monitors, displaying complex strings of Cyrillic-like characters and mathematical notations. Do you have any idea how important this hardware is? If you spill coffee on this schematic, I will have your job before the liquid hits the floor. I'm sorry, sir, Jamie mumbled, shrinking back. I'll be careful. Just get out of the way, Harrison muttered, turning back to the CEO. Arthur, listen. Volkov was senile in his final years. This notebook, found in his dacha, it's the ramblings of a madman. There is no ignition sequence. We're chasing ghosts. The government paid us $2 billion for that ghost, Grant. Sterling roared, standing up. Find the pattern. I don't care if you have to summon Volkov's spirit via a Ouija board. Translate it. Jamie backed away, clutching the dirty dishes to her chest like a shield. She looked at the giant screen one last time. The text was handwritten, scrawled in erratic, jagged ink. To the 50 engineers in the room, men with degrees from MIT, Caltech, and Zurich, it was an unbreakable cipher. But to Jamie, it looked like a grocery list. She bit her lip, turned on her heel, and pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She knew that handwriting. She knew those jagged loops. She hadn't seen them since she was 6 years old, sitting on a rug in a dusty apartment in Tbilisi, Georgia, watching her grandfather write letters to a man he called the magician. 11 p.m. The tension in the ballroom had shifted from panic to a terrifying, silent despair. Room service had stopped. The hotel staff had been dismissed for the night, except for a skeleton crew. Jamie was supposed to clock out at midnight, but Rick had caught her by the lockers. They ordered another round of espressos and club sandwiches, Rick said, looking exhausted. Everyone else is gone. You take it in, set it up, then you can go. Jamie nodded. She didn't argue. She needed the overtime. She loaded the silver cart. The smell of fresh coffee usually comforted her, but tonight it made her nauseous. She wheeled the cart out of the kitchen, the wheels gliding silently over the plush carpet of the hallway. When she entered the ballroom, the lights had been dimmed. The only illumination came from the blue glow of 50 laptops and the massive projection screen. The atmosphere was funeral. Grant Harrison was slumped in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Arthur Sterling was pacing by the window, looking out at the rain-slicked streets of San Francisco. "It's over," a younger engineer whispered. He was holding his head in his hands. "The ignition protocol requires a precise thermal variance variable. Volkov wrote it here." He pointed to a line on the screen. "But it translates to, the blue sheep jumps over the iron fence at dawn. It's nonsense. If we enter the wrong variable, the engine explodes. If we don't enter it, we breach contract." "Blue sheep," Harrison scoffed, sitting up. "Maybe it's a metaphor for cobalt? Or Cherenkov radiation?" "We tried that," another engineer replied, her voice cracking. "Simulation failed. Total catastrophic containment breach." Jamie parked the cart near the door. She should have just announced the coffee, left the cups, and ran. But she couldn't move. She stared at the line on the screen. "Syni barashek prigay через железный забор на рассвете." The engineers were using Google Translate, military-grade translation AI, and Russian linguists. They were translating the words literally, but Jamie didn't see words. She heard a rhyme. A nursery rhyme. "Syni barashek." "It's not a sheep," she whispered. She hadn't meant to say it aloud. The room was so quiet that her whisper sounded like a gunshot. Heads turned. 50 pairs of eyes, red-rimmed and angry, locked onto the waitress standing by the coffee cart. Grant Harrison slowly swiveled his chair around. His eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" Jamie's face burned. She gripped the handle of the cart until her knuckles hurt. I have the coffee, sir." "No." Harrison stood up. He walked over to her, his movements predatory. He was a tall man, imposing, used to being the smartest person in the room. "You said something. You said it's not a sheep. What did you say?" "I didn't mean to interrupt," Jamie stammered, looking for an exit. I saw the screen." "And?" Arthur Sterling had stopped pacing. He was watching her now, an unreadable expression on his face. "And?" Jamie swallowed hard. "The translation. It's wrong. It's not a sheep. And it's not Russian. Well, it is Russian words, but the grammar. It's Kartvelian syntax applied to Cyrillic vocabulary. It's a dialect used in the Upper Svaneti region, specifically by the mountain shepherds in the 1980s. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then Harrison laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "Did you hear that, gentlemen?" Harrison smirked, looking around the room. "The waitress is giving us a lecture on linguistics. Listen, honey, stick to the latte art. We're doing actual work here." "Grant," Sterling said, his voice sharp. "Let her speak." "Arthur, come on," Harrison groaned. "She's cleaning tables. She probably heard Svaneti on a travel blog." "I didn't," Jamie said, her voice trembling but gaining a strange, steel-like edge. She looked at Harrison, then at Sterling. "My grandfather was a shepherd in Ushkuli. He knew Alexei Volkov. They played chess by mail for 20 years. The room went still again. Sterling walked over to her. He didn't look at her apron or her cheap shoes. He looked her in the eye. What does it mean? The blue sheep. Jamie took a deep breath. She walked past Harrison, ignoring his scoff, and approached the screen. She felt small next to the glowing data, but the words were screaming at her. It's an idiom, she said, pointing to the word Bereshek. In standard Russian, this means little ram, or sheep. But in the dialect Volkov used with his friends, blue sheep was a nickname for a specific type of thermal insulator they used in Soviet heaters because the foam was dyed blue and looked like wool. She turned to the engineers. He's not talking about an animal jumping a fence. He's talking about the blue wool insulator exceeding the iron fence, which is slang for the melting point of ferrite-heavy alloy. She paused. He's saying the insulation will melt before the metal heats up. You need to cool the insulator, not the core. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then, the young engineer who had been crying typed furiously into his laptop, simulating, reversing the cooling flow to the external insulation layer. A progress bar appeared on the main screen. Simulation running. 25%, 50%, 75%. The bar turned green. Simulation successful. Ignition stable. The young engineer gasped. My God. She's right. The thermal variance dropped to 0. It works. Harrison's jaw dropped. He looked from the screen to Jamie, his face draining of color. Arthur Sterling looked at Jamie. Who are you? I'm just the waitress, Jamie whispered. She turned to leave. Wait, Sterling commanded. That was just one line. We have 40 pages of this. I have to go, Jamie said. My shift is over. If I miss the bus, I have to walk 6 miles in the rain. Screw the bus, Sterling said. He pulled a chair out, the one right next to him at the head of the table. Sit down. I'll pay you $5,000 for the night. Jamie stopped. $5,000. That was 6 months of rent. That was her mom's surgery. 10,000, Harrison blurted out, trying to regain control of the situation. If she's actually right, 10,000. Jamie looked at the chair. Then she looked at the manuscript on the screen. It wasn't just money. It was her grandfather's voice. It was a puzzle she had been born to solve. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the coffee cart. Okay, she said, sitting down. But I take my coffee black. October 15th, 2023, 2 a.m. The dynamic of the room had shifted violently. The 50 engineers, previously the masters of the universe, were now silent scribes, huddled around the small woman in the black uniform. Jamie didn't type. She spoke. Next line, she commanded, her shyness evaporating in the heat of the work. The dancer spins on one leg until the ice breaks. Harrison read aloud, his tone skepticism replaced by a grudging, terrified respect. It's not a dancer, Jamie said, rubbing her eyes. Volkov loved ballet, but he loved gyroscope physics more. The dancer is the gyroscopic stabilizer. Spins on one leg means a singular axis rotation. Ice breaks isn't ice. It's the crystalline matrix of the fuel filter. She grabbed a napkin and a Sharpie. He's saying if you run the gyroscope on a single axis past 40,000 revolutions per minute, the fuel filter shatters from the vibration frequency. He's describing a harmonic resonance failure, the engineer with the NASA shirt whispered, typing it in. Holy. Looking at the schematics, the fuel filter is mounted right next to the stabilizer housing. If we hit 40 kRPM, the engine tears itself apart. Correct, Jamie said. So, dampen the mount. Done, the engineer said. Arthur Sterling watched her with an intensity that made the other executives nervous. He wasn't just looking at a translator. He was looking at a resource he had almost thrown away. How do you know all of this? Sterling asked during a brief lull, handing her a bottle of sparkling water. You said your grandfather was a shepherd. Jamie took the water. Her hands were steady now. He was. But before the Soviet Union collapsed, he was a mathematics professor in Kiev. When the purges happened in the scientific community, he fled to the mountains. He became a shepherd to survive. Volkov was his student. When Volkov became famous, he never forgot my grandfather. They wrote to each other in code, so the KGB wouldn't understand the physics they were discussing. They hid the science inside stories about sheep and mountains and dancers. And he taught you? He didn't have anyone else, Jamie said softly. My parents died when I was little. It was just me and him and the sheep. He taught me calculus before I could read. He taught me this code as a bedtime story. Why are you working here? Harrison asked. It was the first time he had spoken to her without a sneer. Why aren't you at MIT? Jamie looked down at her hands. Grandpa got sick. Alzheimer's. The treatments were expensive. I dropped out of my scholarship program to take care of him. He died 2 years ago. I've been paying off the debts ever since. A heavy silence fell over the table. The men in the room, with their 6-figure salaries and stock options, looked at the floor. They had assumed she was unintelligent because she served them food. They had never stopped to think about the economics of survival. We have a problem, the young engineer interrupted, his voice trembling again. What is it? Sterling snapped. We're at the last page. The Omega Protocol. The final activation key. Jamie looked at the screen. Her blood ran cold. The handwriting on the last page was different. It wasn't jagged. It was rushed, frantic. And the ink was different, darker. If the wolf knocks 3 times, burn the house. Do not let him in. The wolf eats the sun. This isn't physics, Jamie whispered. What? Harrison leaned in. The rest of the journal. It was playful, complex, but playful. This. Jamie traced the image on the screen. This is a warning. The wolf was the code name for a man my grandfather was terrified of. A rival scientist. A man named Victor Krez. Sterling froze. Victor Krez? The head of Helios Corp? Our main competitor? Yes, Jamie said. Volkov is saying that if the system detects the wolf, an external intrusion, or a specific frequency, it must burn the house. It's a self-destruct mechanism. Self-destruct? Harrison paled. We're about to upload this code to the prototype. If there's a self-destruct command hidden in the boot sequence, then the engine doesn't just fail, Jamie finished. It explodes with the force of a tactical nuke. We have to scrub the code, Sterling said. Find the trigger. I can't, Jamie said, panic rising in her chest. This part. It's not in the shepherd's dialect. It's pure mathematics. But it's incomplete. Look, she pointed to the bottom of the page. The equation cuts off. Volkov died before he could finish the countermeasure. So we have a bomb, Harrison said, his voice hollow. And we don't know how to disarm it. And the upload is automatic, the young engineer said, checking his watch. The satellite uplink is scheduled for 4 a.m. That's in 20 minutes. We can't stop the uplink from here. It's hardwired into the mainframe at the Nevada test site. Call the site. Tell them to cut the power, Sterling yelled. We can't, the engineer said. There's a storm in Nevada. Comms are down. The system is autonomous. The room erupted into chaos. Engineers were screaming, typing furiously, trying to hack their own system. Jamie sat perfectly still. She closed her eyes. She thought of her grandfather. She thought of the smell of rain on wool. She thought of the chess games. When you are in checkmate, Jamie, her grandfather had told her, you do not look at the board. You look at the man sitting across from you. Volkov didn't finish the equation because he didn't have time. But Volkov was arrogant. He wouldn't create a lock he couldn't open. He didn't write it down, Jamie whispered. What? Sterling was beside her. The countermeasure. He didn't write it down because he didn't need to. It's not a math problem. Jamie grabbed the laptop from Harrison. Hey, shut up, Jamie yelled. She had never yelled at a customer in her life. It's a chess move. She looked at the incomplete equation. The variables were arranged in an 8x8 grid matrix. It's the Queen's Gambit, Jamie said, her fingers flying across the keys. Volkov's favorite opening. He's sacrificing the queen to save the king. We don't need to solve the math. We need to complete the chess move. Are you insane? Harrison shouted. If you enter a chess move into a fusion reactor compiler, you'll kill us all. Arthur, Jamie looked at the CEO. Trust me, the wolf eats the sun. But the king hides in the castle. Sterling looked at the clock. 3:58 a.m. Do it, Sterling said. Arthur, Harrison screamed. Jamie ignored him. She typed in the notation for the castling maneuver. Lindolin. She hit enter. October 15th, 2023. 4:01 a.m. The progress bar on the massive screen hung at 99% for a second that felt longer than the entirety of Jamie's life. The room was so silent you could hear the hum of the hard drives and the frantic, shallow breathing of Grant Harrison. Then, the screen flashed. Not red. Blue. A new line of text appeared, crisp and clear in English, generated by the system's compiler. Protocol 0-0 accepted. Core isolation complete. Castling successful. We have a heartbeat, the young engineer breathed, his fingers trembling over his keyboard. Telemetry from Nevada is coming in. The core temp just dropped. It's stable. The reaction is self-sustaining. The room didn't erupt into cheers immediately. It was a room of scientists, and they were in shock. They stared at the data streaming down the screen, beautiful, symmetrical curves of energy output that shouldn't have been possible. Then, Arthur Sterling let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He slumped into his chair, covering his face with his hands. We did it. That broke the spell. The engineers jumped up. High fives were thrown. The young engineer, who had been crying earlier, let out a whoop of joy. Someone popped a bottle of champagne that had been sitting in an ice bucket, waiting for a funeral or a celebration. Jamie didn't cheer. She felt a sudden, crushing exhaustion. The adrenaline that had sharpened her mind was fading, leaving her limbs heavy and her head pounding. She was just a waitress again. A waitress who had intruded on a world where she didn't belong. She quietly stood up and moved toward her coffee cart. She picked up her apron. Where do you think you're going? Arthur Sterling's voice cut through the celebration. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at her. Home, Mr. Sterling, Jamie said, clutching her apron. My shift ended 4 hours ago. You just saved a $2 billion contract and, quite possibly, the reputation of American aerospace, Sterling said, walking toward her. He looked different now, less like a statue, more like a man who had seen a ghost. And you want to take the bus home? I have a dog, Jamie lied. She just wanted to leave before the magic wore off, and they remembered she was nobody. He needs to be let out. Grant, Sterling barked, not taking his eyes off Jamie. Write her a check, right now. Grant Harrison was standing by the window, his face a mask of humiliation. He looked at Jamie, then at Sterling. Arthur, we need to vet her. We can't just hand cash to a civilian who had access to classified. Write the damn check, Grant. Sterling roared. $50,000. You said 10, Jamie whispered. I'm adding a hazard bonus for dealing with Harrison. Sterling said dryly. Harrison flushed a deep crimson. He pulled a checkbook from his briefcase, scribbled furiously, and ripped the paper out. He walked over to Jamie and shoved it into her hand. He didn't make eye contact. Thank you, Jamie said. She looked at the check. It was more money than she had ever seen in one place. It was freedom. It was her mom's health. It was a new life. And one more thing, Sterling said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy, titanium business card. Report to my office on Monday morning, 9 a.m. Bring your passport and your grandfather's chess set. Why? Jamie asked. Because you're not wiping tables anymore, Jamie. Sterling smiled. You're my new lead cryptographer. The room went silent again. Harrison looked like he was about to have a stroke. Arthur, you can't be serious, Harrison hissed. She has no degree, no clearance. She's service staff. She solved in 2 hours what you couldn't solve in 2 years, Sterling said coldly. I don't care if she has a degree from Mars. She speaks the language. Jamie looked at the card. Lead cryptographer. It was a dream she hadn't dared to dream since she was sitting on that rug in Tbilisi. I can't, Jamie said softly. Why not? Because I never finished college, she admitted, the shame creeping up her neck. I don't have the credentials. Jamie, Sterling stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper so only she could hear. Look at that screen. You see that code? That's your credential. Monday, 9 a.m. Don't be late. Jamie looked at him, tears prickling her eyes. She nodded. Okay. She turned to the door, clutching the check and the card. She felt like Cinderella leaving the ball, except she had the glass slipper in her pocket. But as she reached for the door handle, the massive screen behind them flickered. The blue text vanished. The screen went black. Then, a single, blood-red symbol appeared in the center of the darkness. A wolf's head. A mechanical, synthesized voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, loud enough to rattle the windows. The wolf is hungry. October 15th, 2023, 4:15 a.m. The celebration died instantly. What is that? The young engineer screamed. I'm locked out. The system isn't responding. Cut the hard line, Harrison yelled, diving for the server rack in the corner of the room. Someone is remote accessing the mainframe. It's not remote. Jamie's voice rang out, clear and sharp. She had stopped at the door. She dropped her apron and ran back toward the table. Arthur, look at the latency. It's 0. What does that mean? Sterling shouted, watching the wolf symbol pulse on the screen. It means the signal isn't coming from Nevada, Jamie said, her eyes scanning the room, her waitress instincts kicking into overdrive. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was looking at the people, and it's not coming from outside the hotel. 0 latency means a direct connection. The hacker is in this room. Pandemonium. 50 engineers looked at each other with sudden, violent suspicion. Friends who had worked together for a decade suddenly looked like enemies. Lock the doors, Sterling commanded. Nobody leaves. Security. 2 large men in suits, who had been standing guard outside, burst into the room and blocked the exits. Everyone away from the computers, Sterling ordered. Hands on the table, now. The engineers scrambled to comply, throwing their hands up. The room was thick with fear. Jamie stood in the center of the room. Her mind was racing. The wolf eats the sun. The text. Jamie muttered to herself. Volkov said, do not let him in. But we didn't let him in. We castled. We locked the door. She looked at the server rack where Harrison was frantically pulling cables. Unless, Jamie's eyes widened. Unless he was already inside before we castled. She walked over to the main table. She looked at the array of laptops. 50 computers. 50 brilliant minds. 1 traitor. Who touched the master console? Jamie asked loudly. Who uploaded the code I gave you? I did. The young engineer, David, said, his hands shaking in the air. But I just typed what you said. 0 to 0. That's it. I believe you, Jamie said. She looked at the setup. The master console was connected to a dedicated server box, a black cube sitting in the center of the table. But for the wolf to appear after the castle maneuver, it means the wolf was triggered by the success. It's a dead man switch. She looked at the red wolf on the screen. It was blinking in a pattern. Long, short, short, long. Morse code? Sterling asked, standing beside her. No, Jamie said. It's not Morse. It's a heartbeat. It's looking for a handshake. She spun around, scanning the engineers. Who is using a Bluetooth device? A watch? A hearing aid? Anything? We all have watches. Harrison snapped. This is ridiculous. It's a hack from Helios Corp. No. Jamie walked toward Harrison. She stared at him. You were the one who wanted to give up. You were the one who said Volkov was mad. You tried to stop me from translating the warning. Harrison laughed nervously. Oh, I see. The waitress is now a detective? You think I'm the mole? I've been with Aerodyne for 15 years. And you've been second in command for 15 years, Jamie said calmly. Always in Sterling's shadow. That's enough, Harrison snarled. Arthur, get her out of here. Check his laptop, Jamie said. This is absurd. Harrison slammed his laptop shut. Open it. Grant, Sterling said, his voice low and dangerous. I have private correspondence on here. Attorney-client privilege. Open it. Harrison hesitated. That split-second hesitation was all the confirmation Jamie needed. But it wasn't Harrison. As everyone focused on the confrontation between the CEO and his VP, Jamie saw movement out of the corner of her eye. It was the quietest person in the room. The one nobody ever looked at. The man sitting at the far end of the table. Dr. Aris Thorne. The structural engineer. He was older, unassuming, wearing a tweed jacket. While everyone was watching Harrison, Thorne had slowly lowered his hand beneath the table. Jamie saw the blue light reflecting off his glasses, a reflection from under the table. "Don't let him send it," Jamie screamed, pointing at Thorne. Thorne's head snapped up. The look of mild-mannered boredom vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. He pulled a small, black device from under the table, a quantum transmitter. "Security!" Sterling yelled. Thorne didn't run. He didn't try to fight. He just smiled, a cruel, thin smile. His thumb hovered over a button on the device. "You're too late," Thorne said, his voice calm. The castling maneuver stabilized the core, yes, but it also decrypted the design files. That was the catch. Volkov hid the blueprints inside the chaos. By fixing the chaos, you assembled the file for me. He's sending the blueprints to Helios, Jamie realized. The wolf isn't a bomb. It's a theft. "Put the device down, Aris," Sterling said, stepping forward. "I'm retiring, Arthur," Thorne said. "Helios offered me 10 million. You offered me a gold watch." Thorne pressed the button. Nothing happened. Thorne pressed it again. He frowned. He looked at the device. The status light, which should have been green, was dead. He looked up, confused. Jamie was holding up a silver coffee pot from her cart. She wasn't pouring coffee. She was holding the heavy, industrial-grade power cord she had ripped out of the wall socket a moment ago. The other end of the cord was wrapped around the leg of the table, specifically around the bundle of cables that fed power to the localized Wi-Fi booster Thorne was using to bypass the hotel's firewall. "I unplugged the router," Jamie said, holding the plug in her hand. "Waitress instinct. When the internet is slow, you reset the router. Or in this case, you kill it." Thorne looked at his dead transmitter. He looked at Jamie. For the first time, he looked truly afraid. "You," Thorne whispered. "Who are you?" "Table service," Jamie said flatly. The security guards tackled Thorne before he could move. The device clattered across the floor, sliding to a stop at Jamie's feet. Sterling walked over and picked it up. He crushed it in his hand. He turned to the screen. The red wolf symbol flickered and died. The screen returned to the soothing green of the Aerodyne logo. Data transfer failed. System secure. The room let out a collective breath that felt like a hurricane. Sterling looked at Thorne, who was being handcuffed on the floor. "Get him out of my sight, and tell the FBI I want him buried under a prison so deep he'll need a submarine to see sunlight." As they dragged the traitor away, the room turned to Jamie. She was standing there, holding a severed power cord, her hair coming loose from her bun, surrounded by dirty coffee cups. Sterling walked up to her. He didn't say a word. He slowly began to clap. One by one, the engineers joined in. Even Harrison, looking pale and shaken, started to clap. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous ovation. Jamie felt her face burn. She dropped the power cord. "I really need to go home now," she mumbled. "Not yet," Sterling said, signaling for silence. Thorne was the mole. But he said something interesting. He said Volkov hid the blueprints inside the chaos. Sterling looked at the screen. "We have the engine working, but we don't know how to build more of them. The blueprints were encrypted in the error code." He turned to Jamie. "The job offer has changed," Sterling said. "I don't need a lead cryptographer. I need a partner. Half the equity in the new engine patent. That's roughly $400 million over the next 10 years. Jamie felt the floor tilt. "Mr. Sterling." "Arthur," he corrected. "But there's a catch." "There's always a catch," Jamie sighed. "To unlock the blueprints," Sterling said, gesturing to the screen where a new, complex riddle had appeared in the corner, a series of musical notes. "We need to go to where Volkov died. We need to go to the mountains in Georgia. We need to find the rest of his journals." He looked at her. "I need a guide. Someone who knows the mountains. Someone who knows the shepherd's dialect. Jamie looked at the musical notes. She recognized the tune. It was a lullaby her grandfather used to hum. The wolf is gone, she thought. But the hunt is just beginning. I can't leave my dog, Jamie said, a small smile playing on her lips. Bring the dog, Sterling said. We have a private jet. Jamie looked at her ugly non-slip shoes. Then she looked at the screen. She looked at the future. Okay, Jamie said. But I'm driving. October 18th, 2023. Ushkuli, Upper Svaneti, Georgia. 10 a.m. The world was white. A blinding, biting white that erased the horizon and froze the breath in your lungs before you could even exhale. Jamie stood at the edge of the cliff, looking down at the stone towers of Ushkuli, the highest inhabited settlement in Europe. The wind howled, tearing at her heavy parka. It was a sound she hadn't heard in 20 years, yet it felt like a mother's embrace. It's beautiful, Arthur Sterling said, stepping up beside her. He was dressed in top-tier Arctic gear, but he looked out of place. He moved stiffly, bracing himself against the gale. And terrifying. It's just winter, Jamie said, pulling her scarf tighter. The mountains don't care if you're a billionaire, Arthur. They just care if you keep moving. They had arrived in Tbilisi on Sterling's Gulfstream jet, then taken a helicopter as far as the weather would allow, and finally hiked the last 3 miles with a team of 4 ex-ass bodyguards. The storm that had grounded the engine test in Nevada was a gentle breeze compared to the blizzard forming above the Caucasus peaks. The hut is up there. Jamie pointed to a jagged ridge half a mile up the slope. Volkov's summer retreat. My grandfather used to take me there to bring him cheese and wool. Are you sure the journals are still there? Sterling asked. It's been decades. Volkov was paranoid, Jamie replied, trudging forward into the snow. He didn't trust banks, and he didn't trust computers. He trusted stone. The trek was brutal. Twice, one of the bodyguards slipped on the hidden ice. But Jamie moved with a strange, fluid grace. She wasn't fighting the snow. She was walking with it. She found footholds where there appeared to be none. For the first time, Arthur Sterling was the one following, and the waitress was leading. When they reached the cabin, it was a ruin. The roof had partially collapsed under years of snow, and the windows were shattered. Sterling's face fell. It's gone. Anything inside would be pulp by now. No, Jamie said. She walked to the heavy oak door, which was hanging off its hinges. She didn't go in. Instead, she walked to the stone chimney on the exterior wall. She ran her gloved hand over the rough, gray stones. She closed her eyes, counting. 1, 2, 3. Jamie? Grandpa told me a story, she murmured, her voice barely audible over the wind. About a king who hid his heart in the stone because the wolf was coming to eat it. She found a loose stone near the base of the chimney. She didn't pull it out. She pushed it in. A heavy, grinding sound echoed through the clearing. The snow at their feet shifted. A section of the stone foundation, hidden beneath a drift, slid open to reveal a dark, dry staircase descending into the earth. A Cold War bunker, Sterling realized. Standard issue for high-value Soviet scientists. After you, Jamie said. They descended into the dark. The air inside was stale and freezing, but dry. Sterling clicked on a tactical flashlight. The beam revealed a room that looked like it had been frozen in time. A dusty chessboard sat on a table, the pieces mid-game. Walls were covered in chalkboard paint, scrawled with the same frantic mathematics they had seen on the screens in San Francisco. But there were no journals, no blueprints. Empty, Sterling said, his voice echoing with disappointment. Someone got here first. No. Jamie walked to the center of the room. There was a large, wooden loom, a traditional weaving frame used by the villagers. On it was a half-finished rug. The pattern was chaotic. Erratic splashes of red, blue, and black wool. The blue sheep, Jamie whispered. She touched the blue threads. Arthur, give me the light. She shone the beam on the rug. To anyone else, it was just a messy, unfinished textile. But Jamie saw the knots. It's not a rug, she said, her breath catching. It's binary. Look at the knots. Over-under is 1. Under-over is 0. The colors denote the file structure: red for thermal, N4, blue for magnetic. He wove the blueprints into a rug? Sterling asked, incredulous. He knew Krez would look for papers. He knew Krez would look for hard drives. But Krez is a man of ego. He doesn't look at women's work. He wouldn't look twice at a loom. Can you read it? I don't have to, Jamie said. We just need to take it. Grab the loom. Sterling ordered the guards. As two guards moved to lift the heavy wooden frame, the radio on the lead bodyguard's shoulder crackled. Contact. Multiple bogeys. East Ridge. They have. The transmission was cut off by the crack of a sniper rifle. The lead bodyguard's head snapped back, and he crumbled to the dusty floor. Get down! Sterling tackled Jamie as a hail of bullets shredded the wooden doorframe at the top of the stairs. Flashbang grenades bounced down the stairs, exploding with blinding white light and deafening bangs. Jamie curled into a ball, her hands over her ears. Smoke filled the small bunker. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard heavy boots descending the stone steps. Secure the room. Kill the guards. Keep the girl and the suit alive. The voice was smooth, accented, and terrified Jamie to her core. She knew that voice. She had heard it on old cassette tapes her grandfather played. Victor Krez, The Wolf. October 18th, 2023. The bunker, 10:45 a.m. The silence that followed the violence was worse than the gunfire. Arthur Sterling was on his knees, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The remaining 3 bodyguards were disarmed and zip-tied in the corner. Standing over them was a man in a pristine white fur coat. He looked like a Bond villain, but his eyes were dead, empty. Victor Krez looked at the chalkboard walls, then at Sterling. Arthur, Krez smiled. You always were dramatic, flying halfway across the world for a pile of rocks. Victor, Sterling spat. You're trespassing on private property. I am retrieving stolen property, Krez said. He walked around the room, tapping the walls with a cane. Volkov stole the kinetic drive theory from me in 1985. I am simply collecting interest. He stopped in front of Jamie. She was sitting on the floor, her back against the loom. She held her grandfather's chess piece, a white pawn, tightly in her hand. And you? Krez peered down at her. The waitress. The anomaly. My spy at the hotel told me you cracked the encryption. Jamie didn't look up. I just read the story. Then read this one for me. Krez pointed to the loom. My men tell me this rug is the data source. A primitive storage method, but clever. Decrypt it. Now. No, Jamie said. Krez sighed. He pulled a pistol from his coat and pointed it at Arthur Sterling's chest. I wasn't asking, my dear. If you don't give me the key to the sequence, Arthur dies. Then your guards. Then I burn this rug, and the secret dies with you. Jamie looked at Arthur. He gave a microscopic shake of his head. Don't do it. But Jamie stood up. She looked at the rug. She looked at the knots. The key, Jamie said, her voice steady, is the unfinished section. You have to finish the weave to complete the circuit of logic. If the pattern breaks, the data is corrupted. Show me, Krez demanded, lowering the gun slightly. Jamie moved to the loom. She picked up the shuttle, the wooden tool used to pass the thread. She looked at the colored wools. Red, black, blue. If the wolf knocks 3 times, burn the house. Jamie picked up the red wool. What are you doing? Krez asked, stepping closer. I'm finishing the sequence, Jamie said. The thermal variance needs to be closed. She began to weave. Her hands moved with a blur of speed, muscle memory taking over. She wasn't just weaving, she was coding. Over, under, over, over. You're making a mess, Krez sneered, watching the chaotic pattern emerge. It's not a mess, Jamie said. Her eyes locked on the threads. It's a thermal loop. She tied the final knot. She pulled the lever to tighten the weave. Done, she whispered. Excellent, Krez signaled to his men. Take a photo of the pattern. Send it to the uplink. We will decode it at the lab. One of the mercenaries pulled out a high-resolution scanner and scanned the rug. He tapped his tablet. Uploading to Helios mainframe. Upload complete. Krez smiled. Thank you, Jamie. You've just made me the richest man in history. He raised the gun again. Now, about loose ends. Suddenly, the mercenary's tablet let out a high-pitched scream. Sir! The uplink. What? Krez turned. The data. It's not data. It's a recursive loop. It's replicating. Cut the connection, Krez yelled. I can't. It bypassed the firewall. It's eating the operating system. It's overwriting the BIOS. Sir! Another mercenary shouted, checking his phone. Helios stock. It's crashing. The trading algorithm. It's going haywire. It's selling everything. Krez spun around to face Jamie. What did you do? Jamie stood tall. She wasn't shaking anymore. I told you, she said. The wolf eats the sun. What does that mean? Krez screamed, grabbing her by the collar. Volkov knew you would steal it, Jamie said calmly, staring into his furious eyes. The red wool isn't the thermal variance, Victor. The red wool is a virus. A polymorphic code woven into the binary. You just uploaded a command to your own mainframe to liquidate your assets and delete your source code. She pushed his hand away. You didn't just burn the house, Jamie said. You burned your own kingdom. Krez's face went purple. He raised the gun to her forehead. I'll kill you. Click. The lights in the bunker died. The tactical flashlights flickered and went out. A low rumble shook the floor. What now? Krez panicked in the dark. I told you. Jamie's voice floated through the blackness. My grandfather was a shepherd. B. A blinding red light flooded the room. Not from a bulb, but from the laser sights of a drone hovering in the doorway at the top of the stairs. This is the United States Department of Defense. A booming voice amplified from outside. We have a lock on your position. Drop your weapons and exit the bunker. Sterling started laughing. A deep, belly laugh. How? Krez whispered, backing away. The weave, Jamie explained. When I tightened the loom, it triggered a pressure switch in the floor. A distress beacon. Volkov really didn't like visitors. Krez dropped the gun. It clattered on the stone floor. 3 months later, the view from the top floor of the Aerodyne Tower in San Francisco was spectacular. You could see the Golden Gate Bridge, the bay, and the fog rolling in. Jamie Jenkins sat at a desk, made of reclaimed glass. She wasn't wearing a polyester uniform. She was wearing a tailored blazer and jeans. Her hair was down. Dr. Jenkins? Jamie looked up. It was her assistant. I keep telling you, it's just Jamie. I don't have a doctorate. The University of Berkeley seems to disagree. The assistant smiled, placing a letter on the desk. They're offering you an honorary PhD in computational linguistics. The ceremony is next month. Jamie touched the letter. It felt surreal. The Volkov Drive was officially public. It was being hailed as the discovery of the century clean, limitless energy based on the fusion principles hidden in a shepherd's rug. Aerodyne stock had tripled. Helios Corp was in bankruptcy proceedings, and Victor Krez was awaiting trial for industrial espionage and attempted murder. Arthur Sterling walked in. He looked younger, lighter. Ready for the board meeting? He asked. Do I have to wear the heels? Jamie asked, glancing at the shoes under her desk. You own 10% of the company, Jamie. Arthur grinned. You can wear slippers if you want. He sat down opposite her. We have a new problem. By the way, he said, sliding a file across the desk. We received a transmission from deep space. The SETI Institute can't crack it. They think it's noise. Jamie opened the file. She looked at the chaotic strings of data. She smiled. It's not noise, she said, pulling a pen from her hair. It's a rhythm. She looked out the window at the city below. She thought of the cold rain, the dirty dishes, and the smell of stale coffee. She thought of the 50 men who had failed, and the one shy girl who hadn't gave up. It's a waltz, Jamie said, turning the page. Let's get to work. And that is how Jamie Jenkins went from clearing tables to clearing the path for humanity's future. It turns out, the smartest person in the room isn't always the one with the loudest voice or the fanciest degree sometimes. It's the one who simply knows how to listen. This story reminds us that talent hides in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes, to solve the complex problems of the future, you have to look back at the wisdom of the past. If you enjoyed this journey from the coffee shop to the icy peaks of Georgia, please smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm find more stories like this. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated at your job? I want to hear your story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.